Let's look at wide-angle lenses, and when I say wide, I'm referring to lenses with a focal length of 30 millimeters or lower. Wide-angle lenses create more apparent distance between objects. That makes them great for small spaces, which is why we use them a lot in the hut scene. Wide lenses can make a space feel bigger than it is. Additionally, the wider the angle, the more that objects close to the lens tend to distort and look bigger than they are. We use this to our advantage in the POV shot of Cordelia getting discovered. The wide-angle distortion made these faces more intimidating. Wide-angle lenses also have a bias where objects close to the lens seem very large, but get much smaller as they get further away. You can see this in one of the shots with Cordelia in the hut. This was shot with a 14mm lens, which is pretty wide. Notice how much more space Cordelia takes up in the frame than that of her older adult sister. Or in this shot in the council scene. In real life, the actor that plays Mark Holland, in the center here, is much shorter than the other actors. But by cheating the shot and by getting in close with a wider lens, we make background objects like these two dudes back here much smaller, and foreground objects like the main guy here much bigger. Now we use a 24mm lens for this shot, and that's one of the reasons that this shot feels so cinematic to me. Again, because we're far away from the focal lengths that represent human vision, it's obvious that we're telling a story, and that is what cinema is all about. This attribute also makes them great for camera moves. Pushing in the camera is usually much better with wider lenses. Shots like these just don't have that much apparent movement with a longer lens. Also, wide-angle lenses can give slider shots like this a lot more depth. This shot used a lens with a super wide focal length of 13 millimeters. You can frequently see wide-angle lenses used like this in Coen Brothers movies, especially those with Roger Deakins as the DP. Here in No Country for Old Men, for example, we see a wide-angle lens in use. Now we can tell it's a wide-angle lens because of the disparity in size between objects that are close to the lens and objects that are further away. Roger Deakins says he likes using wide-angle lenses because the audience senses that the camera is close to the subject. The theory here is that this creates more intimacy between the audience and the subject in the film. Another thing to note about wide-angle lenses is they tend to allow more of the frame to stay in focus. This is one of the reasons why cell phone cameras and action cameras, like GoPros, tend to have wider angle lenses in them. The wide focal length captures more of what's happening, but it also makes it easier to get all that stuff in focus. Now, the downside of this, of course, is that it's more difficult to direct the audience's attention without the ability to really dial in what they should be focusing on and what they shouldn't be focusing on. And finally, be aware that wide-angle lenses tend to cause lens flares much more frequently than longer lenses do. For wide establishing shots in small spaces where you don't have as much control over where to put the lights, this can cause some headaches. So make sure your gaffer has flags handy when you're using wide-angle lenses. So next, let's look at the other side of the coin and learn about long lenses.